I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
There's something about Keanu Reeves that people struggle to explain. And it's not his movies, not The Matrix, not John Wick, it's something else. If you scroll through thousands of comments, you start to notice a pattern. People don't just admire him, they feel him. Some call him a legend, others something different. An angel, a rare soul, even someone sent here for a reason. Now that sounds exaggerated at first, but then you stop for a second and you ask yourself, why him? Because Hollywood is full of famous actors, bigger careers, bigger money, bigger headlines, but very few create this kind of emotional reaction in people who have never even met them. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because when people talk about Keanu Reeves, they don't talk about success. They talk about pain. They talk about loss. And strangely, they talk about themselves. You see it over and over again. I know how he feels. I went through something similar. My life too. It's almost like his story doesn't belong only to him anymore. It belongs to everyone who has ever had to keep going when stopping would have made more sense. And maybe that's the part no one really talks about. Because what people see today, the quiet voice, the calm presence, the way he moves through the world without needing attention, that didn't come from fame. That came from something much earlier, something quieter and much harder. He was born on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, not exactly where you'd expect a future Hollywood icon to begin. And almost immediately, life didn't follow a straight path. His father wasn't really there, not in the way a child needs. No big explanation, no closure, just absence. And if you've ever experienced that kind of silence growing up, you know it doesn't leave loudly. It stays. His mother tried to rebuild life again and again. New cities, new relationships, different versions of starting over. Sydney, New York, Toronto. But nothing stayed long enough to feel permanent. And maybe you felt something like that too. When things finally start to feel stable, and then suddenly, they're not anymore. That kind of life teaches you something early. Not confidence, not certainty, something else. How to endure. School didn't make things easier. Keanu struggled with dyslexia, which made even simple tasks feel like uphill battles. Words didn't always stay still on the page. Teachers didn't always understand. At one point, he was expelled, not for violence, not for rebellion, for asking too many questions, which says more about the system than it does about him, because sometimes the person asking questions is the only one actually paying attention. And maybe that's where it started. Not the fame, not the success, but something much deeper, a kind of quiet resilience, the kind that doesn't make noise, but carries everything. And at 15, just when he finally found something that felt like it belonged to him, it disappeared. And what happened next, most people never connect to the man you see today, but they should, because that moment changed everything. At 15, Keanu Reeves had something most kids spend years trying to find. Not fame, not success. Something simpler, something solid. Hockey. It wasn't just a hobby, it was structure. For the first time in his life, there were rules that made sense, a place where effort led to results, where things didn't suddenly disappear overnight. On the ice, everything slowed down. He wasn't the kid moving from city to city. He wasn't the one struggling in school. He was focused, present, in control. They even had a nickname for him, the Wall. And if you think about that for a second, it says a lot. Because sometimes people don't become strong, they become necessary. And for Keanu, hockey wasn't just a dream, it was direction. He wanted to go further, possibly the Ontario Hockey League, maybe even something bigger. For once, the path felt real, predictable. And then, it stopped. No warning,
no slow transition, an injury. And just like that, the one thing that felt stable in his life was gone. Now here's the part most people miss. Losing something hurts, but losing the only thing that made sense, that does something different. It leaves a kind of silence behind, the kind you don't immediately know how to fill. And maybe you've felt that before, when something you built your identity around suddenly disappears. You don't just lose the thing, you lose who you were inside it. That's where Keanu found himself. No hockey, no clear direction, still dealing with the same instability, just without the one outlet that held it together. And this is usually where people break, or drift, or disappear into something else. But something subtle happened instead. Not a big moment, not a dramatic decision, just a shift. He found acting, not in a glamorous way, not with some grand realization. It was more like a place to put everything he couldn't explain. Because acting doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't ask you to have everything figured out. It just asks you to be present. And for someone like Keanu, that mattered. Scripts weren't easy. Dyslexia didn't just disappear. Reading was still a struggle. Lines took longer. Understanding took effort. But something about performance felt different. Because on stage or on camera, no one was asking him to explain himself. They were asking him to feel. And maybe that's why it worked. Because when you've gone through instability early in life, you learn to read people differently. You notice tone, silence, energy, things that don't need words. And suddenly, what used to be a disadvantage started becoming something else, an advantage. But it didn't feel like success, not yet. It felt like survival. Small roles, commercials, low-budget productions. Nothing stable, nothing guaranteed, just movement, forward. And if you think about it, that's the pattern that keeps repeating in his life. Not comfort, not certainty, just continuing, even when nothing feels secure, even when the direction isn't clear. And that quiet decision to keep going anyway, that's the part people don't see. But it's the part that builds everything that comes next.
Los Angeles doesn't welcome people. It tests them. And when Keanu Reeves arrived there, he wasn't prepared in the way people imagine. No connections, no guarantees, just a car, a few belongings, and a direction that still didn't feel completely real. He wasn't chasing fame. Not exactly. It was more like he didn't have anywhere else to go. And that changes the way you approach things. Because when you're not trying to become someone, you end up revealing who you already are. At first, the work was small. A Coca-Cola commercial, a few minor television roles. Nothing that stood out. Nothing that made people stop and say, "This is the one." And if you've ever tried to build something from nothing, you know how that feels. You show up, you try, and most of the time, nothing happens. Doors don't open, people don't call back, and slowly, doubt starts to grow. Not loudly, quietly. The kind that sits in the back of your mind and asks, is this actually going anywhere? That question stayed with him for years, because even when opportunities came, they didn't always come the way he wanted. One role starts to define you, then another, and before you realize it, people stop seeing potential. They start seeing a label. That happened after Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It was a success. People loved it. But success doesn't always give you freedom. Sometimes it traps you. Suddenly, he wasn't seen as serious, not complex, just light, easy. And if you've ever been misunderstood like that, you know how frustrating it can be.
because no matter what you do next, people are still reacting to a version of you that doesn't feel complete. He wanted more, deeper roles, something real. But Hollywood doesn't always reward that. It rewards what's predictable. And for a while, it looked like that might be all he'd get. Then something shifted, slowly, not with a huge breakthrough, but with small moments people started noticing. River's Edge, a performance that didn't feel polished, didn't feel manufactured. It felt honest, almost uncomfortable, because there was something in it that couldn't be faked. And this is where things get interesting, because when actors perform pain, you can usually tell it's acting. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's recognition. And that's what people started picking up on, without fully understanding why. He wasn't just playing characters, he was carrying something into them, something that didn't come from scripts. And that's also when he met River Phoenix, not just a co-star, something closer, a rare kind of connection, the kind you don't have to explain. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like he wasn't moving alone anymore, like maybe he had finally found a place that made sense. But if there's one pattern that keeps repeating in his life, it's this. Just when something starts to feel stable, it doesn't stay that way. And what happened next wasn't a career moment. It was something much harder to recover from.
There are moments in life that don't feel real when they happen. Not because they're small, but because they're too big to process all at once. For Keanu Reeves, one of those moments came in October 1993. A phone call. Simple. Short. Irreversible. River Phoenix was gone. 23 years old. Collapsed outside a club in Los Angeles. And just like that, someone who understood him without explanation was no longer there. Now think about this for a second. Not as a headline, not as a celebrity story, but as something personal. Have you ever had someone in your life who didn't need explanations? Someone who just got it? That kind of connection is rare, and when it disappears, it leaves a different kind of silence. People around him noticed something after that. He didn't react the way most would expect. No public breakdown, no dramatic statements, just quiet. Which, if you've ever gone through real loss, you understand, because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't show up as noise, it shows up as absence. He kept working. He showed up on set. He said his lines, but something had shifted. Not visibly, internally. And here's where things become uncomfortable to talk about, because audiences started praising his performances more. They said he felt deeper, more real, more present. But what they were actually seeing was grief. Not performed, carried. There's a difference, and most people don't notice it, but they feel it. And maybe that's why so many people today say they connect to him without fully understanding why. Because when someone carries something real, it changes how they move through the world, through roles, through conversations, through silence. River's death didn't just take a friend, it changed the way Keanu experienced everything after that. Success didn't feel the same. Recognition didn't land the same way. Because when you lose something that matters, everything else becomes quieter, less important. And life didn't slow down to give him space to process it. It kept moving. Projects, expectations, opportunities, all continuing as if nothing had happened. And maybe you've felt that before too, when something in your life changes completely, but the world around you keeps going like nothing happened. That disconnect can be harder than the loss itself. But this wasn't the only time life would do that to him, not even close. Because just a few years later, when things seemed like they might finally stabilize again, something happened that would change him in a way no one could see. And this time,
It wasn't about losing a friend. It was something much closer.
By the end of the 1990s, things finally looked different. Not perfect, but calmer. Keanu Reeves had built something, a career that was growing, a name people recognized. And for the first time in a long time, something personal began to take shape too. Her name was Jennifer Syme. They met in 1998, not at a red carpet event, not through Hollywood circles, just two people crossing paths. And from what those close to them later described, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, real, the kind of connection that doesn't need to prove itself. And maybe that mattered more to him than anything else, because after everything he had lived through, he wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for something stable, something that stayed. And then came something even bigger. Jennifer became pregnant. Now pause for a second, because this part matters. For someone who grew up without stability, without a consistent sense of family, this wasn't just news, it was possibility. A different kind of life, a chance to build something that didn't disappear, a home that didn't move, a connection that didn't break. They even chose a name, Ava. Everything was being prepared, quietly, carefully. And then, December 24th, 1999, Christmas Eve, their daughter was stillborn. No warning, no time to prepare, just silence. The room that was meant to welcome life became something else entirely. And there's something about that kind of loss that's hard to explain, because it doesn't just take a moment, it takes the future attached to it, all the things that were supposed to happen, but never will. And maybe you don't even need to have lived that exact situation to understand the weight of it, because loss, in any form, has a way of leaving spaces that nothing else fills. People close to Keanu later said he didn't talk much about it, not publicly, not even privately most of the time, which again says more than words ever could. Because when something is too heavy, you don't always express it, you carry it. The relationship didn't survive, and that happens sometimes, not because people don't care, but because the pain becomes too much to hold together. They separated, quietly. No scandal, no drama, just distance. And if the story ended there, it would already be enough, more than enough. But it didn't, because less than 2 years later, in April 2001, Jennifer Syme died in a car accident. Just like that. And now, think about what that means, not as a headline, not as a story, but as something real. The same person you planned a future with, the same person connected to the child you lost, gone, completely. That kind of sequence isn't something people recover from quickly. Sometimes, not at all. And yet, if you look at him today, you wouldn't immediately see it. And that's what makes it different. Because some people show pain, others carry it so quietly, the world mistakes it for calm.
If you look at Keanu Reeves today, you don't immediately see everything he's been through. That's the strange part, because most people after a life like that change in a very different way. They become harder, colder, distant. But he didn't. And that's exactly why people react the way they do. Because when someone goes through loss after loss and still chooses kindness, it stands out. Not in a loud way, in a quiet one. You see it in small things, the way he talks to strangers, the way he avoids attention, the way he gives without needing credit. There are stories, some confirmed, others just shared quietly over the years, about him helping crew members financially, giving away portions of his earnings, or simply sitting next to someone, treating them like they matter. And maybe that's why so many people don't describe him as an actor. They describe him as something else, a rare soul, a different kind of person, even an angel. Now, whether you believe that or not, There's something behind it, because people don't say those things about everyone, especially not about celebrities. And if you read what people write about him, you start to notice something deeper. They're not just talking about him, they're talking about themselves. People who have gone through illness, loss, loneliness. People who say, I understand him. I feel what he carries. My life has been similar. And maybe that's the real reason his story hits so hard. It's not just what happened to him. It's what people see in themselves when they hear it. Because not everyone becomes famous. Not everyone becomes successful. But almost everyone goes through something. Something that changes them. Something they don't talk about easily. And when they see someone who has carried that kind of weight without turning bitter, it gives them something rare, perspective, maybe even hope. And I'll be honest with you, when I first looked at his story, I thought it was about tragedy. But it's not. Not really. It's about something much harder to explain. It's about what someone chooses to become after everything that could have broken them. So now, let me ask you something. When you look at Keanu Reeves today, what do you actually see? A successful actor? Or someone who went through more than most and still chose to remain human? Because maybe that's the part people are reacting to. Not the fame, not the roles, but the fact that in a world where people change easily, he didn't. And maybe that's why so many strangers feel like they know him.